A bag isn't just a bag. It's a status symbol, a cultural object, and sometimes even a better investment than gold. But why do we care so much? Why does the sight of a Birkin on someone's arm immediately change how we see them? From iconic classics like the Chanel flap to newer cult favorites like Alaïa's Coeur bag, luxury bags have built this entire mythology around them. They're not just accessories, they're loaded with meaning. Every unboxing, every what's in my bag video that goes viral tells us the same thing. We're not just looking at a bag, we're looking at lifestyle, power, and identity. And in this video, we're going to talk about why that is and how luxury bags came to hold so much weight in fashion and beyond. Hey guys, my name is Anna. I hope you're doing well, and let's get into it. So let's start with a super quick history moment just to get our bearings. Basically, bags have always existed in some form because people have always needed to carry stuff. Even in prehistoric times, people would tie animal skins or weave grasses together, sling them over a stick, and create makeshift sacks. Function first, style came later. As money started becoming a regular part of life, people needed a way to carry it. And that's when little coin pouches showed up, often tied to clothing. In ancient Rome, men had something called a sinus, basically a fold in the front of their togas where they would tuck stuff. Women, on the other hand, had secret pockets hidden under their skirts. As society evolved and became more class-based, bags started signaling status. That's where things really get interesting. Bigger bags and backpacks were mostly used by peasants or people without servants, so if you had to carry something heavy yourself, that meant you weren't elite. Upper-class women didn't need to carry much because other people did it for them. So naturally, their bags became smaller, fancier, and more decorative. Think little silk pouches covered in embroidery, jewels, even gold thread. Inside, you'd find coins, a mirror, maybe a prayer book, perfume salts, dice, or a deck of cards. The real turning point came in the 15th century. That's when bags started being categorized by occasion. There were bags for walks, bags for dates, bags for formal events. They varied in size and shape depending on their purpose. And of course, the wealthier you were, the more extravagant your evening bag looked. It stopped being purely practical and became part of the whole look. By the mid-19th century, handbag production finally started moving from individual artisans to actual factories. Up until then, bags were all custom-made by hand, which meant only the richest had access to them. So the rise of factories made bags slightly more available, but they were still seen as luxury items. And around that time, we see the first real handbag brands begin to appear. When we think of the early history of luxury bags, the first name that usually come to mind are Coeur, Louis Vuitton, and Hermès. And that makes sense because they're some of the oldest high-end houses out there, and they were around in the 19th century. But here's the thing, back then they weren't making handbags the way we think of them now. Their main focus was luggage. Trunks, travel gear, huge pieces meant for long trips, not for walking around town. Women's handbags the way we know them today only came about much later. Unofficially, the very first women's handbag ever made came from a London brand called A.J. Cave & Sons. It was actually founded by a woman, Harriet Jane Cave. In 1841, a guy named Samuel Parkinson commissioned a custom gift for his wife. They were about to go on a trip and he wanted her to have something smaller than a suitcase, something she could actually carry in her hand. That's what Cave made, so technically it was still a travel bag, but it had a more feminine, personal scale. That's why people often debate whether that counts as the first handbag, because when we say women's handbag, we usually mean the kind you carry with you every day, not just for travel. That credit actually goes to the Belgian house Delvaux, one of the oldest in the world. They were founded back in 1829, but it wasn't until 1908 that they patented the very first modern women's handbag. And that patent changed everything. Here's why. Up until then, as we've seen with the first example, bags were either scaled down luggage or little pouches for coins. Delvaux introduced a whole new structure. Their model called Princess came with a reinforced base, proper internal compartments, and a locking mechanism, all designed to support daily use. That meant women could finally carry everything they needed in one stylish, organized bag. It sounds normal now, but back then it was a revolution. Then came Hermès. Yeah, we can't talk about handbag history without them. In 1923, they were the first to add a zipper to a woman's handbag. That's when the Bolide was born. The rounded shape was designed specifically to fit into a car trunk. Very modern, very practical. Again, something this new, therefore that relevant to the changing lifestyle of women. Coeur also played a big part. Way back in the 19th century, they invented their iconic waterproof canvas, Goyardine. but at first they only used it for luggage. It wasn't until the 1930s that they applied it to women's handbags with the now famous Saint Louis tote. That's when their bags became recognizably Goyard, lightweight, waterproof, and covered in that subtle but chic chevron pattern. And then comes one of the biggest game changers in handbag history, 1955. You already know what I'm about to say, Chanel 255. Coco Chanel, being Coco, looked at the way women were carrying bags and thought, enough with always using your hands, so she added a chain. And just like that, women could wear their handbags on their shoulders and keep their hands free. It was such a simple change, but it felt completely radical. You can tell a woman designed it. It's practical and elegant at the same time. So now that we figured out when the handbag first appeared and how it evolved, let's get into why it became so important. Because at some point, the handbag stopped being just something we carry things in and became this huge cultural symbol. Why did that happen? How did we become so obsessed with bags? The idea didn't just appear out of nowhere. The term conspicuous consumption was coined back in 1899 by an American economist named Thorstein Veblen. He used it to describe how people buy things not just for their function, but to show off their wealth to others. Before the 19th century, this kind of behavior was mostly reserved for the highest classes. These people literally dressed to remind everyone around them of their power. Wealth was not private. It had to be worn, displayed, and seen. But something shifted near the end of the 1800s. The middle class was growing, and with it came this new hunger for status. The middle class started copying the habits of the elite, big houses, shiny jewelry, tailored clothes, and as production scaled up and luxury goods became slightly more accessible, the gap between real wealth and projected wealth started to blur. That's when the game really began. Fast forward to the last 10 years and the whole idea of status through consumption has gone completely next level, mostly because of social media. Now we're not just seeing what wealthy people wear in magazines or on red carpets. We see what they eat for lunch, how their beds are made, what they wear every single day. And that constant exposure creates a new kind of desire. Something is visible, therefore it becomes aspirational. We've started performing our consumption, taking photos of our engagement rings, our cars, even our plates at restaurants. After all, phone eats first, right? We don't just enjoy the thing. We post it, tag it, filter it, and let others compare it to their own lives. And because we're wired to notice signs of status, we zoom in on them. That's why our clothes, accessories, and even the tiniest details of our outfits send a message. Even if we're not saying anything at all, there have been tons of studies to prove this. One showed that people assumed a person wearing a custom-tailored suit was more successful and capable than someone wearing an off-the-rack one, even if both suits look pretty similar. Another study found that when someone held a luxury handbag, strangers rated them as more attractive, more intelligent, and more interesting. Not because of anything they actually said or did, just because of the bag. And one of the researchers behind those studies, Daniel Langer, was so shocked by how consistent the results were that he kept repeating them year after year for 15 years. And each time, same result. One single item could shape the entire impression of a person, and that's basically the halo effect, because our brains spot one signal of status and then fill in the blanks with a bunch of other assumptions. So something like expensive bag becomes, ooh, this person is successful, smart, well put together, etc. That's how we ended up with the handbag as the go-to status symbol for women. Because here's the thing, a bag is incredibly versatile. It doesn't need to fit your body type. You don't have to try it on in a dressing room under weird lighting. It matches most of your closet, and it doesn't go out of season as fast as clothes or shoes. And it lasts longer, which makes it a smarter investment when you've got a limited budget and want something that will elevate your entire look. It's easier to justify saving up for a quality bag than for, say, a designer white blouse that might be ruined by next summer, or worse, out of style. So yeah, a bag is democratic in its own way. It works for more people, therefore it naturally became the one thing women could use to express status, taste, and identity without worrying whether it will flatter their figure or fit their waist. It's more than just a thing to carry stuff in. It became a kind of language. And now that we've unpacked that, no pun intended, it's time to finally get into what makes a bag an it bag. And what exactly does it mean? Why do some bags go viral while others don't? Well, we've just discussed that the first reason bags became the go-to status symbol was their versatility. But the second, just as important, is visibility. Because these days, even mid-range brands know how to make clothes that look expensive. At the same time, a lot of luxury brands have quietly lowered the quality of their clothing, so now just by looking at someone's outfit, it's way harder to guess how much it actually cost. With bags though, it's different. First of all, bags often feature visible logos, monograms, or signature shapes that are instantly recognizable. We'll talk more about iconic shapes later, but the idea is simple. Something about the design signals, this bag is expensive. And the reality is, it's much harder to make a cheap bag look expensive, especially when it comes to leather. Bad leather is obvious. The texture, the shine, the stitching, it all gives it away. Therefore, a bag becomes the clearest, most obvious status marker in someone's look. There's also a third reason people gravitate toward bags when they want to signal status. Economic liquidity. It's a practical one, but a big one. Bags, especially the cult classics, often go up in value over time. So for those of us who don't have an unlimited budget, it's easier to justify a splurge when we know we're not just spending, but potentially investing. Because being the Lulu is the Solulu. A really good bag holds its value. Sometimes it even gains value. Therefore, it feels smarter to spend on one timeless bag than on a bunch of smaller purchases that won't last. There's even a real term for this, the status bag. It started being used in the 1990s, which makes sense because the 90s were when fashion took a hard turn towards marketing. Before that, design and craftsmanship were the main focus, but in the 90s, it became about the brand. That's when we got the supermodel era, all those legendary ad campaigns, and a ton of new brand vocabulary. Limited editions, exclusive drops, capsule collections, everything became more about the idea of luxury than just the product. Bags fit into that perfectly. They became the centerpiece of luxury marketing. Because here's the thing, bags are way more profitable for brands than clothes. Once a brand has one hit bag, it can carry them literally for decades. Accessories have higher markups, they don't need sizing, they don't take up much storage space, and they're easier to display in boutiques. No fitting rooms, tailoring, or seasonal pressure. Therefore, from a business perspective, it makes total sense why brands push bags so hard. And that's why we, the consumers, are drawn to them too. The ads, the campaigns, the celebrity street style, it all leads us straight to the bag section. And since we're already talking about the 90s, we gotta mention two other terms that popped up during that same period and never left. Cult bags and it bags. We don't just hear those terms now, we use them constantly, we see them in magazines, and that's where we're headed next. What actually makes a bag cult? What's the difference between cult and it bag, and which bags made the cut? The term it bag actually came before cult bag, but we'll talk about that one a little later in the next part. It bag, on the other hand, first appeared in 1997, but it's directly connected to a much older idea, the it girl. That one goes all the way back to 1927. The original it girl was Clara Bow, an American actress who shot to insane levels of fame after starring in the film It. According to the book the film was based on, it was this unexplainable quality, the kind of magnetism that made people instantly drawn to you. If you had it, you didn't need anything else. That's what Clara Bow had, and ever since, each generation had their own it girls. Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly, Jane Birkin, Marilyn Monroe, then came the 2000s with Paris Hilton, Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, and now Bella Hadid, obviously. The point is, every era has women who just define the cultural moment, and whatever they wear, that becomes the thing. Back to the 90s. That's when luxury had its big boom. The golden age of glossy magazines, mega marketing campaigns, supermodels, and the rise of fashion as fantasy. Bernard Arnault and the other luxury CEOs sold more than just products. They sold stories that made luxury feel not only beautiful but absolutely necessary. That's also when the it girl idea came back in full force, but now updated. It girls wore it things. This applied to more than bags. Sunglasses, jewelry, belts, anything with that perfect blend of desirability and status. So what made something an it bag? First of all, it had to be unmistakable. Something about it had to stick in your memory. It needed to be fresh, feel exclusive, and this is the key, it needed to be carried by someone who had it. The right bag on the right person at the right time. That's basically the recipe. Now, here's where it gets fun. There are actually 4 different versions of what the first it bag really was, and they're all kind of surprising. Version 1 comes from fashion historian and journalist Nancy McDonnell. She wrote a column for the Wall Street Journal called Fashion with the Past, and in one of her deep dives, she claimed the first it bag was the Phelps bag. It was worn in the 1940s by Vogue editor Barbara Babe Paley. Apparently, the bag had a very distinctive shape, and Paley had such an iconic way of styling it that people immediately took notice. Version 2 is from our favorite source, Wikipedia, which says the first real it bag came in 1945 from Giuliana Camerino, the founder of Venetian fashion house Roberta di Camerino. She made bags using materials traditionally reserved for clothing: velvet, brocade, and bald theatrical hardware. The result was instantly recognizable. They stood out from everything else on the market, and people started copying them right away. That level of influence is exactly what you want in an it bag. Therefore, this one definitely fits the definition. Version 3 might sound more familiar. Some say the first true it bag was the Kelly by Hermès, thanks to Grace Kelly. She was photographed using the bag to hide her pregnancy bump, and then she said, "Congratulations on your little bump." And overnight, it became a symbol of elegance and mystery. The bag was actually created earlier under a different name, but after that photo, Hermès renamed it Kelly, and it's been iconic ever since. The thing is, though, all of these bags only got their it label retroactively. The term it bag didn't exist yet, so the hype wasn't called that at the time. That's why version 4 is the most convincing and the one I personally agree with. In 1997, the Baguette by Fendi dropped, a small, sleek little shoulder bag that tucks under the arm like a French loaf, hence the name. It was instantly fresh, modern, and fun. Vogue called it the first real it bag. Then came Sex and the City. There's that unforgettable scene where someone tries to rob Carrie and she goes, "It's not a bag, it's a baguette." That moment sealed the deal. The bag completely sold out. That level of cultural impact is what turns a bag into an it bag. It goes beyond being just a product and becomes a pop culture symbol. So now that we know what an it bag is and where the whole idea came from, next we're going one step deeper. What makes a bag a cult bag? Because not all bags stay relevant, but the truly iconic ones, they never leave the spotlight. Okay, let's take a little walk down memory lane. So a proper it bag throwback tour starting from the 2000s all the way to today. This nostalgic block actually helps us understand the patterns. What kind of bags get crowned as it bags and why? So let's go. Spring Summer 2000. That was the year the Dior saddle bag basically took over the world. Same story with the Fendi Baguette. Once it showed up in Sex and the City, it was game over. There's the scene where Carrie hides her cigarettes from Aiden in the saddlebag, and just like that, the bag becomes a character in its own right. By the end of 2001, Dior's accessory sales had shot up by 60%. That's what this bag did. It became the ultimate symbol of the ultra Y2K aesthetic. And then, years later, Maria Grazia Chiuri caught the early wave of the 2000s revival, and in 2015, she brought the saddlebag back. Therefore, second life, second wave of popularity, second time it bag status, full circle. Then came 2003, bringing a whole moment. I'm talking about the Louis Vuitton Takashi Murakami collab. Marc Jacobs had just discovered Murakami's work, and he was like, "We have to do something together." What's important here is that this wasn't simply a cute print collaboration, it was a cultural reset. Because at the time, fashion and fine art were still two very separate universes. People saw fashion collaborations with artists as gimmicks, so neither real art nor serious design, but Marc Jacobs convinced Murakami and they dropped a collection that changed everything. Bright rainbow monograms, sakura blossoms, cherry motifs, all of it captured the energy of the 2000s. Everyone wanted those bags, and then, like with so many trend-heavy pieces, people got tired of them. They were seen as kitschy, too much, even tacky. But fast forward to 2025, and guess what? Louis Vuitton is reissuing the Murakami collab, and suddenly everyone is posting their vintage Speedy on TikTok again. By the mid-2000s, bag sizes got ambitious, enter the era of the oversized slouchy tote. Spring-summer 2005, Phoebe Philo, yes her, the queen of quiet luxury before it had a name, was creative director at Chloe, and she gave us the Paddington. That chunky lock, the soft leather, the way it looked expensive even when styled with a wrinkled tank top. Vogue editors hyped it up, celebrities were spotted everywhere with it, and Chloe played it smart. They sent the bags out before the launch, so when the collection finally dropped, all 8,000 bags sold out instantly. It became the symbol of the early boho glam era, and honestly marked Phoebe's first mega hit. It was the golden era for Chloe. Now, where's the Paddington today? That's a really good question, and one that's still up for debate because some people swear it's coming back, others are still haunted by how heavy that padlock was. So building on the Paddington wave, in that same spring-summer 2005 season, Fendi dropped the Spy bag, a bag that basically every fashion girly wanted. It was kind of the Paddington's cooler cousin, same boho energy but a little more mysterious. The design was full of cool little details. It had braided handles, the secret coin purse hidden inside, and that soft flap top closure. It looked like it held secrets, and that's exactly why it worked. It wasn't only about looking good, it had personality. It wasn't trying to be sleek or minimal either. By the end of the 2000s, things were shifting again. In 2008, there was the Prensa Scholler PS1, and let's be honest, that bag feels like a bit of a sleeper hit. People don't talk about it much anymore, but back then it felt like a fresh breath after all the hyper feminine and overdone bags of the early 2000s. The PS1 was academic, low-key cool, it gave off art school energy, and it felt right for the time. Plus, it was made by a young brand that hadn't been totally absorbed by the luxury machine yet. Fun fact, Prensa guys ended up becoming creative directors at Loewe, so that whole intellectual/artisan thing, they really ran with it. On the topic of structure, functionality, and effortless style, Celine under Phoebe Philo defined the early 2010s with the release of the luggage tote. It's funny now because the bag was huge, literally. Everyone was walking around with what looked like a baby suitcase on their arm, but it made sense. Phoebe was designing for women who needed space but didn't want to look like they were carrying a gym bag. The luggage tote was architectural, sharp, and just practical enough to make sense in real life. Around the same time, 2010, Riccardo Tisci at Givenchy gave us the Antigona. Named after Antigone from Greek mythology, the vibe was all about power, rigidity, and control. That trapezoid shape with the sharp edges wasn't a mistake. It was the fashion equivalent of a power suit. And while it never had the playful feel of some of its peers, it definitely held down the id bag fort for a solid few years. Fast forward a bit, 2014, the Chloe Drew bag drops. I still remember how that soft, rounded little thing was on everyone. It was girly but not too sweet, gold chain, minimal branding. It was a hit and it had its moment, though it's kind of faded now, but it definitely captured the soft, pretty mood of the mid-2010s. Now 2015. This one is special. Loewe Puzzle Bag by Jonathan Anderson. If I had to choose one bag to represent the post-2015 decade, it would be this one. It was smart, it was fresh, it was and still is incredibly made. The kind of bag that leather nerds obsess over. At first it was kind of an insiders only thing. You had to get it, but slowly over time it built its reputation. 10 years later, it's become a staple, and in my opinion, it deserves every bit of that status. And yeah, I did a whole video on Loewe's rise and rise story, so if you want to dive into that, it's all there. Jumping into 2018, the era of extremes. On one end, you had Jacquemus Lo Chiquito, tiny, ridiculous, meme-worthy. At first, people made jokes, then they bought it, then it basically started a microbag trend that's still going. It wasn't really about carrying things, it was about attitude. And on the complete other side of the spectrum was the Dior book tote. Giant, loud, embroidered, the kind of bag you take to the beach on a fancy resort. It became the travel tote for a minute. Instagram loved it, and for about 2 years, it felt like everyone had one. Then came 2019, and with it, a bag that honestly kind of marked the rise and fall of influencer seeding as a strategy, Louis Vuitton multi-pochette. Don't get me wrong, it's a really cool concept. The layered pouch idea was fresh and actually kind of useful, but it got sent to every influencer on the planet at the same time, and because of that, boom, oversaturation. It became too much, way too fast. But for 2019, it was undeniably the bag. 2020, a strange year for bags in general. People weren't exactly going out and showing off accessories, but one bag still managed to grab attention. Telfar shopping bag. Functional, unisex, and affordable, it symbolized a shift from luxury status symbols to something more democratic. People were looking for meaning, for identity, for something grounded, and the Telfar shopping bag reflected it. By 2022, the Y2K revival was in full swing, and with it came the return of loud, over-the-top designs. Balenciaga dropped Le Cagole, a reimagined city bag with even more edge. Grommets, chains, little heart-shaped mirrors, attitude for days. It was everywhere for a while, but like the multi-pochette, once something gets too popular too fast, it tends to fade just as quickly. And that's exactly how it went. Still in 2022, Mathieu Blasi arrives at Bottega Veneta and debuts the sardine bag. Understated, sculptural, and really cool. It had that signature Bottega weave, but twisted into something that felt more artsy and less corporate. Slowly, it started gaining traction, and in my opinion, that slow burn is a great sign for long-term relevance. Then 2023, it's Miu Miu's moment. The Wonder Bag blows up, especially among Gen Z. Slouchy, playful, it hit that sweet spot between nostalgia and practicality. And in 2024, Arcady bag takes over. A campaign with Gigi Hadid helped, of course, but the bag itself, soft, easy to carry, not trying too hard, felt like the right kind of luxury for the post-pandemic years. Same year, Balenciaga Rodeo bag tries to position itself as the next Birkin, but it never got there. The design had potential, but something about the execution didn't fully land, so now it's kind of coasting on the tail end of its hype. Another 2024 contender, Alaïa Le Tequel. Long, skinny, and chic. It's part of this east-west bag trend where brands stretch out their classics horizontally. We're seeing these new shapes pop up everywhere. Even Lady Dior got a stretched out remix. And speaking of more accessible options, Coach Brooklyn bag. Gen Z went crazy for it. It's proof that an it bag doesn't need to be a 3,000-euro leather sculpture. Sometimes it's about the nostalgia, the attitude, and the timing. So as you can see, there's a pattern that makes a bag it. The design has to stand out, whether it's the shape, the details, or even the branding. It needs to be instantly recognizable. Think of the saddle or the puzzle bag. So basically bags you can spot from across the room. Sometimes it's also about the playful touches, so charms, chains, hidden compartments like the spy or Le Cagole. Then there's the influence of celebrity culture, both real and fictional. Some it bags gained their status thanks to strategic visibility. Characters like Carrie Bradshaw, though fictional, shaped public taste via mass media, while figures like Paris Hilton amplified desirability in real time by being constantly photographed by the paparazzi. This kind of cultural saturation drives recognition and demand. Timing also plays a critical role. Broader cultural moods, economic conditions, and fashion trends have to align. A design might exist for years, but only becomes an it bag when the context around it shifts, when it suddenly feels of the moment. So when design, cultural relevance, and timing intersect, that's when an it bag is born. But what's the actual difference between an it bag and a bag that's just trendy? A trend bag is just that, something that reflects what's currently in style. If everyone, for example, is suddenly into suede totes, then any suede tote from any brand counts as a trendy bag. Simple as that. But an it bag is a whole different story. It's not just about being trendy, it's about a specific design from a specific brand that becomes instantly recognizable. Something that doesn't simply follow a trend, but sets the tone for it, shaping what comes next rather than reacting to what's already popular. And that's why we went through all those different bags earlier to really see the pattern. Some of them, as we see now, have disappeared from memory. I mean, who still talks about the Fendi Spy or Chloe Paddington anymore? Hardcore fashion lovers might still appreciate them, of course, but you rarely see them out and about. And that's the thing with it bags. There's usually this huge explosion of popularity, and then just as quickly it fizzles out. It bags become time capsules, so little icons of specific moment in fashion. Sometimes a bag gets a second life. Take the Dior saddle or the Louis Vuitton and Takashi Murakami collab. Those had their big moment, faded a bit, and then boom, got relaunched and blew up all over again. Then there are bags that go beyond the typical it bag life cycle. For example, the Fendi Baguette, the one we started with. It was the it bag. bag. Then it faded from the spotlight for a while, and now, even if it's not constantly sold out, it's still around. People still wear it. The design lasted. It held its ground across changing trends and proved its staying power. That kind of longevity is what takes a bag from trend-driven to truly iconic. So then what exactly is a cult bag, and which ones have reached that level? First off, cult bag is also a term invented by fashion media. It started popping up a bit later than it bag, somewhere around 2003, and since then it's been used a lot, sometimes maybe too much. And you'll see a million articles titled Top 10 Iconic Bags of All Time, and each one is a little different, which makes sense because at the end of the day, everyone has their own taste and references, but I wanted to be a bit more structured and as objective as possible, so I browsed and looked into various top bag picks from leading fashion sources and combined them all together. So this final list that I'm about to reveal shows the top 10 cult bags that appear most often across these rankings. So simply put, the more a bag is mentioned, the higher it ranks. This way, we're not just going off opinion, we're looking at how the fashion industry as a whole treats these bags over time. Number 10, Balenciaga City. Cool, slouchy, rock chic, worn by everyone in the 2000s from Kate Moss to the Olsen twins. Interesting fact, Balenciaga's execs didn't even want to produce it. They thought it was too soft and too unstructured, but Nicolas Ghesquière pushed for it. And once models started wearing it off-duty, the buzz began. Then the Olsen twins took it to another level. Their grungy glam look, oversized layers, sunglasses, city bag in hand, turned the bag into an instant icon. Number 9, Loewe Puzzle. The youngest member of this ranking and surely here to stay. Jonathan Anderson somehow turned a bag into a cult classic in just 10 years. The Birkin took around 20 years to reach the status, much of it post-factum thanks to Birkin herself, but Anderson did it in a decade. As I mentioned, Puzzle was unlike anything else on the market. It's been reissued in tons of sizes, materials, and colors, but the original design still holds strong. It's that rare kind of bag that's both artsy and wearable, and that's exactly what made it a quiet, steady cult hit. Number 8 is Bottega Veneta Jodie, famously carried by Jodie Foster herself. Bottega has launched so many cool bags recently with bold, sculptural designs that sometimes the Jodie gets overshadowed, but don't let that fool you. It's still very much relevant and definitely iconic. It's a favorite among fashion insiders who love something unique but understated. Even years after its debut, the Jodie holds its spot in conversations about cult bags. Number 7 are Prada nylon bags, known for their variety including versions made from recycled nylon. Probably the most budget-friendly in this ranking because of the material, but iconic in their own right. Their practicality, sleek design, and modern edge have made them favorites among fashion lovers who want style without the usual luxury price tag. Consistently mentioned together, these bags show that innovation and sustainability can go hand in hand with cult status. Dior saddlebag, already discussed but worth noting again for its revival under Maria Grazia Curie, cementing its status as a lasting cult classic. Lady Dior. Named after the unforgettable style icon Princess Diana, this bag combines classic elegance with a modern edge, making it a favorite among fashion insiders and celebrities alike. Its quilted design and structured shape are instantly recognizable, symbolizing timeless luxury. Over the years, the Lady Dior has maintained its status as a true cult bag, continually reinventing itself while honoring its iconic heritage. Number 4, Chanel 255. And while you might have expected it to rank higher, me too, a few other bags have kept Chanel just shy of the top 3. As I mentioned, the 255 is the original bag Coco Chanel designed. It's often confused with the classic flap, which is actually Karl Lagerfeld's modern update. The 255 was groundbreaking for its chain strap and clever details, while the classic flap added the CC logo and the leather woven chain. Over the years, it's proven to be a true cult piece, timeless, and universally loved. However, lately, Chanel's faced criticism over quality. Like Hermès, they've started limiting classic flap production to keep it exclusive, making it harder to buy than it used to be. Number 3, Louis Vuitton's Speedy Bag. Louis Vuitton's Speedy Bag might surprise some by edging out Chanel's iconic bags for 3rd place. Why? Because the Speedy was Louis Vuitton's first real women's handbag. Before that, they only made travel bags like the Keepall. The Speedy is basically a mini version of the Keepall, and it got popular fast. Audrey Hepburn loved it, which gave it a huge boost. It got a massive resurgence in the 2000s thanks to the Takashi Murakami Tommy collaboration. Limited editions always keep bags legendary, and Speedy had its fair share. Pharrell Williams gave the Speedy another push when he created the Millionaire Speedy, a bag worth $1 million, positioning it as a men's luxury bag. That one is a legit cult bag. And before we continue, here's an honorable mention. The Rose Margaux bag. It's become insanely popular, with tons of influencers rocking it everywhere. Its sleek, minimalist design and understated luxury have definitely caught the eye of the fashion crowd. But can Margaux really be called a cult bag yet? For now, I'd say it's more of an it girl status bag. It ticks a lot of boxes, it's trendy, it's hard to get, and beloved by style insiders. However, a true cult bag needs more than just influencer love and hype. It requires a deep-rooted brand heritage, lasting timelessness in design, and the kind of staying power that makes it relevant decade after decade. Margaux is on its way, but it hasn't quite reached that legendary status yet. We're finishing with the one and only, the bag that showed up in pretty much every ranking I checked, the Birkin. You might say, but Anna, what about the number 2? Well, I didn't forget it. It goes together with the Birkin. So let's talk brand first. We're diving into Hermès because if you ask them, almost all of their bags are iconic. According to them, their cult bags list includes the Constance, Kelly, De La Cavalleria, Lindy, Birkin, Ulysse, Evelyn, and many more. You get the picture. Hermès doesn't do modesty, but since we're not just going by the word, the Birkin tops our ranking. Before jumping on the Birkin hype train, let's rewind a bit. The bag holding the second spot is of course the Kelly. It started as sac à dépêche and became iconic thanks to Grace Kelly. The photo, the moment, you know the whole story. By 1977, it was officially renamed in her honor. But why isn't the Kelly the top cult bag? Why does the Birkin take the crown? The Birkin story is basically a step-by-step guide on how to make a cult bag. In the 80s, Hermès owner Jean-Louis Dumas noticed the Kelly had lost some sparkle. Hermès wasn't as buzzworthy as before, so he decided to create a new Kelly, a fresh icon. And here's the kicker. To make a new Kelly, you need a new Grace Kelly. By some crazy stroke of luck, Jean-Louis Dumas meets Jane Birkin on a plane. Jane complains she can't find a large practical bag and carries a basket instead. That's when the light bulb goes off. Here is my new Grace Kelly, sitting right next to me. Jane Birkin was already a huge style and cultural icon and exactly what Hermès needed. Fast forward to 1984 and the Birkin bag is born. It didn't instantly explode in popularity. After all, the 80s were all about Chanel bags. But even early on, there were waiting lists for the Birkin. Hermès tightly controlled production, releasing limited batches, which is key. Creating scarcity is part of the recipe for cult status. So here's the takeaway for creating a cult bag. Start with a superstar muse like Grace Kelly or Jane Birkin, then limit production to keep things exclusive. The Birkin didn't hit real superstar status until the 2000s, and it was largely thanks to Sex and the City again. That show gave the Birkin cultural cachet beyond just the fashion world. After that, the Birkin started popping up in tons of movies and TV shows, which only boosted its cult status. The crazy part is Hermès has even gone to court to prove they didn't pay for those appearances. They insisted all those Birkin cameos happened without their approval or any deal with the producers. Curious, right? Still, Hermès openly confirms they spend millions on marketing the Birkin, just not in the usual way. Cause when is the last time you saw a Birkin ad? You rarely see Birkin ads in Vogue or on billboards, at least I've never noticed one. So where does all the marketing money go? It goes into building the image behind the scenes, buying articles, planting stories, and letting celebrities and influencers talk about their Birkin. This seeds the hype that then spreads organically, sometimes even without Hermès actively pushing it. And I promise, in this case, in this video, it was not sponsored by Hermès, although I wish it was. That's a genius level of marketing here. It's not about direct ads, but smart PR that creates this aura around the bag. The first big boom happened in the 2000s, but then after 2015, during the economic boom, demand exploded. Waiting lists stretched to 6 years and counting. Even now, Hermès consultants talk about those waiting lists, but it's an open secret that who you know plays a huge role. There is also a secondary market that thrives, you can pay huge sums to skip the wait, but that just adds to the legend. So yeah, that's what really makes a cult bag. It's this cool mix of things, like being linked to an icon or a big cultural moment, having that scarce exclusive vibe with limited runs or waiting lists, and rocking a timeless design that never feels dated. Plus, they usually pop up in pop culture in a way that feels natural, not forced thanks to smart marketing. The cult bags don't just fade away, they stick around and come back again and again through different generations. Alright, that's it for today's deep dive into cult bags. If you've enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. Also, follow me on Instagram and TikTok for more behind the scenes content. And of course, drop a comment telling me which bag you think deserves cult status next and what your dream bag is. I'll be replying to every single comment because I really want to know your thoughts. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next one. Bye bye.